how to fix it. Worlds will live, worlds will die, and the Arrowverse will never be the same. This week marks the week that the first half of the annual Arrowverse crossover event premieres, and this one happens to be based on my all-time favorite event comic ever, Crisis on Infinite Earths. As such, I'd like to commemorate it by looking at one of the older Arrowverse-wide crossovers, and the first multiple Earth crisis that the Arrowverse ever faced, Crisis on Earth X. When I decided to commemorate the crossover, my idea was that I'd either look at this one or Elseworlds, but I pretty quickly decided against Elseworlds because, one, there's not really that much that I would consider bad about it, and anything that was unsatisfying, such as the glorified cameo of John Wesley Shipp's Barry Allen, will probably be paid off in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and two, it succeeded at being what it was made to be, a prologue for Crisis on Infinite Earths. Seriously, that bit at the very end with Psycho Pirate giving the worlds will live, worlds will die, and nothing will ever be the same speech gives me goosebumps by just thinking about it. Crisis on Earth X, on the other hand, it's not bad by any stretch, and I actually really liked it when I first saw it, but what fun is watching TV if there aren't flaws to make fun of and fix? Strap in, folks, and get ready to punch some Nazis, because this is Crisis on Earth X. So, for just a Cliff Notes version of where each show was at in their specific seasons, for Supergirl, the only relevant plot detail, because again, Kara's cast gets absolutely shafted, like in both Invasion and Duet, is that both Kara and Alex have recently had major relationship problems, with Alex being dumped by her fiancée, Maggie Sawyer, because of Alex's desire to have kids, and Kara having recently been reunited with the Daxamite prince Mon-El, who had been exiled from Earth because of the atmosphere being seeded with lead, the Daxamite's kryptonite, to stop his mother's invasion, and he had gotten sucked into a wormhole that sent him to the future, where he spent several years, was cured of his weakness to lead, and married Imra Ardeen, aka Saturn Girl of the Legion of Superheroes. And because Kara hadn't yet gotten over her loss of him since it was like 6 months after he left for her, she's taking that news badly. For Arrow, Oliver is still reeling from the Lian Yu explosion and balancing being mayor of Green Arrow, which has recently gone public, so he's being charged for his vigilantism, and being a father to his son, while dealing with a bunch of his old rogues returning, including Black Siren. For The Flash, after Barry returned from the Speed Force prison, he and Iris finally set a date to be married, in the middle of the emergence of Clifford DeVoe, aka the Thinker. For the Legends, they're currently tracking down a time demon named Mollis, and Rip Hunter has been jailed by his own Time Bureau for misappropriating Bureau resources to allow the resurrection of Damien Dark, but that's not really relevant. What is, though, is that Professor Stein, after his daughter Lily gave birth to a son named Ronnie, desires to leave the team to retire, so he and Jax have been searching for a method to split the Firestorm Matrix so Jax can remain on the Wave Rider, since if they stay apart too long, Stein goes nuclear. I think that's pretty much everything you need to know, so let's get to the crossover itself. Part 1 has a short prologue of the Earth X Guardian getting his ass kicked by Nazi Green Arrow, and allowing the Nazis to steal a dimensional transport device. Other than that, it's mainly the assembly of all the teams, with each show's cast deciding what to do in regards to attending Barry and Iris' wedding. Which I think is kinda weird, since you'd think they would have RSVP'd a while ago, even if they only set the date recently. I mean, how is this even a conversation that Ollie and Felicity have to have? The only one that it makes sense for is the Legends, because with a time machine, they'd probably get lazy in regards to timed events. Supergirl actually gets it right, since it plays the decision off as something Kara deliberately put off because of her issues with Mon-El, who Barry and Iris listed on the invite. Kara brings Alex to Earth 1 as her +1, Ollie and Felicity are obviously all in, and so are the Legends, even if not all of them make it to the wedding proper. Meanwhile, on Earth X, Nazi Supergirl and Nazi Green Arrow prepare the machine with the scientists demanding a day to test it before they invade. They do a rehearsal dinner where Kara sings a song, since if you forgot, she was on Glee. Alex and Sarah Lance get to know each other over a bottle of scotch. Joe gives a speech. Stein tells Jax that he synthesized a formula that will give Jax the crappiest spider powers ever.
Incredible adhesion, like glue. You'll just be stuck right on something, no sliding off. The spectacular sticky man.
And Felicity and Ollie have it out regarding their relationship, where Ollie proposes, and Felicity declines loudly in front of everyone because the crossover just can't help upstaging Barry and Iris. The next morning, everyone wakes up with Alex discovering that she had a one-night stand with Sarah, the fantasy of men and women alike throughout history. At the church, Barry is approached by a strange girl before the ceremony who will turn out to be his daughter Nora from the future. Long story, superhero shows are weird. And the wedding starts, presided over by William Cat? Naturally, since it's a superhero wedding, it's suddenly attacked by Nazis, and poor Father William Cat is vaporized. It's probably for the best, though. He was getting really close to outing John Oldman for being an immortal caveman. And if you thought I was going to go for the low-hanging Greatest American Hero reference, you're absolutely right. Believe it or not, angels do walk on air. Yeah, I've never actually seen an episode of the show, all I know is the theme song. That leads into a super badass fight between all the heroes, where they get to shine using their powers and or skills to kick Nazi ass. Hell, even Harry gets in on the heroing, helping evacuate the church. Supergirl goes toe-to-toe with her Nazi doppelganger, and eventually the threat is halted, with Nazi Prometheus being captured and unmasked, revealed to be not Adrian Chase, as he was in the regular universe, but Tommy Merlin, or at least his Earth X counterpart, who gloats about how awesome the Nazis are before popping a cyanide capsule, as per tradition. Part 2 has the other heroes being introduced to the multiverse, and for the viewers who don't watch Flash. Meanwhile, the Nazi Arrow and Nazi Supergirl, who are married BT-dubs, meet up with another Nazi villain, Nazi Reverse Flash, who, it turns out, is just regular Eobard Thawne.
Direct from Earth 1.
Their next move is stealing something called a prism and outsmarting our heroes to escape with it to create a red sun generator, revealing that the target was never Barry or Oliver. The target was Kara. See, Nazi Kara is sick and needs a heart transplant from another Kryptonian, and who better to be compatible than a doppelganger? Now, I'll accept that they might have known about Kara since Reverse Flash can time travel, so he probably knew about the wedding in advance too, which also explains their targeted attack for the Dimensional Transporter. But you're telling me they chose to attack the biggest gathering of metahumans that they possibly could? That's like trying to kill a prisoner in Iron Heights with the metahuman dampeners off. Stupid. But it fits with the Star Trek trope of evil equals stupid. Also, Ollie and Felicity work through their emotional junk that I don't care about because I don't watch Arrow, and Jax and Stein work through their emotional junk that I do care about because I watch Legends. And it mainly amounts to Stein realizing that Jax wasn't resistant to losing Firestorm or his powers, he was resistant to losing Stein. Alex also works through her emotional crap about Sarah with Kara. They track down the Nazi villains and they try to take them down, but they only succeed in getting half the team captured in the pipeline, and the heavy hitters, Barry, Ollie, Sarah, Alex, Jax, and Stein, being sent to Earth X to be kept in a concentration camp run by the Earth X version of Quentin Lance, while Thawne commandeers Star Labs to operate on Kara. Part 3 has the team managing to escape because their arrival coincided with the Resistance bringing Ray Terrell, aka the Ray, from the camp with the help of Ray's fiancé, Leo Snart. It's always nice to see Wentworth Miller, especially because he missed out on the last crossover on account of Snart kinda sorta being dead. They're brought to their base where their leader is the Earth X version of Win Shot, and they team up and request that they be allowed to bust into the Nazi-controlled base so that they can utilize the machine to go home and defeat the Nazis. Earth X Win is resistant, but is talked into it, and they use Oliver's face to trick the guards into letting them in, which actually reminds me of another show featuring the multiverse. Meanwhile, Thawne begins to operate on Kara after using the prism to weaken her, while Iris and Felicity, having escaped capture, try to liberate Star Labs from the Nazis. Unfortunately, because they don't have powers, the best they can really do is send a distress call out to the Wave Rider and hope that they can show up in time. After a huge battle getting into the Nazi base, with the Ray and Barry taking out a red tornado, they manage to bust inside and activate the machine, but on the way out, there's a casualty. Stein is shot while activating the machine and mortally wounded in the final moments of the episode. Ignoring the complicated stuff featuring a prominently Jewish character, the rabbi in fact, getting gunned down by Nazis for the moment, Part 4 has them returning to Earth 1 with Stein, Jax having formed Firestorm to keep his condition stable. Thawne goes to remove Kara's heart, but is stopped when the scalpel won't cut, because it's being held back by our great disaster-stopping pal, Ray Palmer. The Legends having gotten the distress call and came in covertly. Nate springs all the prisoners, and the battle for Star Labs begins, with the Legends, Team Flash, and the Arrow B team taking out Metallo. Nazi Arrow chases after Supergirl and threatens Felicity, but Ollie threatens Nazi Supergirl, trying to talk Nazi Arrow down. Before either of them can strike, though, Thawne zips in and pulls the Nazis out. With the crisis over for the moment, Jax gets Stein onto the Wave Rider, and while he tries to hold on, his condition worsens, with Gideon unable to do anything. Jax is slowly dying with Stein, forcing Jax to let Stein go and take the serum to separate the Matrix, despite Jax's objections. Ironically, Legends of Tomorrow had just introduced a new character named Zari, and while Victor Garber's departure was due to him getting an opportunity of a lifetime to star in Hello, Dolly on Broadway, which I totally don't fault him for taking, this is the second show that I've watched that featured the death of a professor to save the life of his young protege, and the introduction of a new female character who isn't entirely a team player at first, right before the death. In fact, this was Season 3. The difference is that Legends of Tomorrow's quality kept rising after this instead of the sharp decline that Sliders took. The groups take their time to mourn, with Jax telling Clarissa and Lily about Stein, and they also discover that Nazi Supergirl's condition isn't just her death if she doesn't get the transplant. She's gonna explode with radiation and cause the Kansas event from Kingdom Come years too early. The full Nazi invasion happens with a glorious fight featuring every hero except Firestorm, and Ollie fights Nazi Arrow, Kara fights Nazi Supergirl, and Barry fights Thawne, but hesitates before killing him, with Thawne wondering what face he'll be wearing next time they meet. It's the Wells face. It's usually the Wells face. Kara manages to get Nazi Supergirl far enough into the atmosphere that the explosion doesn't do any damage, and Kara falls to Earth, being caught by Steel, as Ollie kills Nazi Arrow. Leo Snart decides to hang out with the Legends for a bit to help them with their grieving, and his own grieving for his Mick Rory. They hold Stein's funeral, and everyone returns home. Right before the end, Barry, Iris, Ollie, and Felicity discuss the wedding, and the desire to make it official, since it was crashed by the Nazis before the vows. Felicity remembers that she happens to know an ordained priest, and Barry speeds away to grab Diggle, who customarily vomits after it and pronounces Barry and Iris as husband and wife. And then he marries Ollie and Felicity too, because the crossover just can't handle giving Barry prominence for 2 goddamn seconds. When I first watched the crossover 2 years ago, I thought it was excellent, and in many ways, I still think that's true. It's an exciting 4-parter that keeps momentum, with excellent pacing, though it's got a bit of a slow start with all the build-up in Part 1. The actors are awesome, as usual, and the doppelganger aspect gives the actors that do get doppelgangers a chance to do something really different. Jeremy Jordan gets to play a confident and brusque Win as opposed to his usual tech geek. Makad Brooks gets to be a total badass, more so than usual. Wentworth Miller gets to be more actively heroic, and Paul Blackthorne gets to play an entirely different take on Quentin Lance. But those are all fun cameos. For the main guys, Melissa Benoist really gets to shine as Nazi Kara, because she gets to ham it up, chewing up the scenery even more than Thawne does. Speaking of Thawne, it is always nice to see him again and fighting Barry, even if his appearance here doesn't quite make sense. My theory is that since when the Legends defeated him, his time remnant didn't vanish the way it did on The Flash, he was actually shunted into the Speed Force, and when Barry escaped in the season premiere, it released more than just dark matter. Nazi Arrow was cool, but he was just about as broody as regular Ollie. Maybe more so, but still, he didn't seem all that different than my usual perception. But all the actors seemed like they were having tons of fun. And like usual, the fight scenes are superb. There's a good balance with us getting at least one awesome fight scene with all the heroes per episode, and smaller fights in between featuring the Trinity. It's also just nice to see characters who don't usually interacting, like Sarah and Alex being their show's token LGBTQIA characters, and Cisco getting to appreciate Dinah Drake's pop culture reference. Apart from shafting the Supergirl cast, mainly David Harewood and Chris Wood, again, the crossover feels more cohesive, like a mini-series or a film split into episodes, like anytime they released a cartoon on VHS as a movie, when it's really just a collection of episodes. Unlike Invasion, which had a more standalone vibe, mainly because they put the Arrow 100th episode smack in the middle like morons, this one feels fluid, and while characters do vanish, it's not just after their respective show ends, and it's given explanations. Wally is absent after the wedding because he's protecting Joe and Cecile from reprisal. They didn't just vanish like Wally, Joe, Iris, and HR did in Invasion after the Flash part ended, despite Barry attempting to sacrifice himself without consulting his family. Nazis are way out of CCPD's jurisdiction, and Wally protecting Joe makes sense. It speaks to a greater respect for the casts of the shows, and not just the main heroes, that was sorely lacking in Invasion, which held Oliver up as the main character, despite Barry being the one who the Dominators feared. There's also lots of good cheeky references to classic DC mythology, most notably the
General, would you care to step outside?
From Superman 2 that Kara gives the Nazi Supergirl, and the "you have to fly her up, and away" from Harry are good levity during the intense fight scene. How to Fix It will return in a moment, but first, a word from our sponsors. Obviously, at Black Scarab Films, we love books, but we're not just about print media here. I do a lot of my reading during my commute, so on the buses and trains, and it's actually where I do a lot of the reading for stuff I review on the show. However, I've had a bit of an issue recently, which is that I'm commuting a lot during rush hour, which means the buses and trains are really crowded, and I rarely, if ever, get a seat unless I'm really lucky. And that makes it really hard to read, since I'm either shoved up against a door or holding onto a pole, and it's very hard to read like this. So I've had to take into listening to podcasts or audio dramas or audiobooks, which is why it's so fortunate that today's episode is sponsored by Audible.com. If you like books but have a similar plight to mine and you need a hands-free option, you want to help out the show, you can go to this link, audibletrial.com/BlackScarabFilms, and get a 30-day free trial and 1 free audiobook. My personal recommendation this month is Still Foolin' 'Em by Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal is an excellent comedian, actor, and Oscar host, but he's also a really good writer/audiobook narrator. His stories of his life and career up to the modern day are a great listen, and especially poignant when coming straight from Crystal himself. But if that's not your taste, there are literally thousands of other audiobooks on Audible, so I'm sure you'll find something to your liking. Happy listening, and the link again is audibletrial.com/BlackScarabFilms. This is less of a problem with Crisis on Earth X and more of a problem of using Invasion first. Nazis don't really compare. I mean, Nazis are bad and all, and it's great to see them get their asses kicked, but aliens? Nazis. There's a reason that DC built up to stuff with the yearly JLA-JSA crossovers, where the threats gradually became more and more serious. Like, if they had done the New Gods crossover as the first one, the crisis involving Johnny Thunder's evil doppelganger altering the timeline would have been far less exciting. Like, it should have been Nazis, then aliens. This one is a personal thing for me, but they missed out on the chance to reunite the Justice League Detroit team, since this was the last crossover where the entire team's Arrowverse analogs were still alive. And now even more so, since they're slowly ticking down the list, killing them all. Though, it's also me being disappointed that John Jones wasn't at least a part of the team-up, since Martian Manhunter is a pretty important superhero for me, since I grew up on the Justice League cartoon. I know they can't leave Earth-38 unprotected with the World Killer around, but Rain can kick the shit out of Kara, so John and the Legion have zero chance of keeping her at bay without Kara anyway, so I don't know why it matters. In fact, this is an issue for the support staff from both Supergirl, Earth X doubles notwithstanding, and Legends. The Legends are absolutely wasted. Ray Palmer, a friend of Barry's, given that they teamed up, wasn't invited to the wedding, but Heatwave was? And he sat with the police captain. I mean, it's a funny scene and I liked it, but I can't imagine that his sentence has been commuted due to his heroing on the Wave Rider. Though, admittedly, that was also an issue with Invasion, where the supporting cast from all the shows were wasted, and I know that the Legends have a lot of people to take care of, since their cast is by far the largest, and they wanted Ray to be around to save Kara because Wrath was Superman, but I don't know why they couldn't have had Ray retreat to the Wave Rider after the first Nazi attack, instead of ignoring his existence entirely until Part 4. Part 4! Of a universe-spanning crossover! That's like if a key member of the Avengers hadn't shown up until the last hour of Endgame. Wouldn't people be pissed? So Gideon, who grew Snart a new hand and healed Sarah from a broken neck, can't handle a few bullets? Okay, to be fair, it was a shit ton of bullets, but you catch my drift, right? She can't clone new organs and transplant them into Stein to replace the damaged ones. It feels weak is all I'm saying. I know that Stein had to leave, but the reasoning didn't justify the results. Gideon is basically able to cure damn near anything, and any characters who had died previously died with no chance of being saved by design. But ultimately, the problem with Stein's death is that Jax left the Wave Rider in the next goddamn episode. They spent a good chunk of the season and a big part of 2 episodes before the crossover, setting Jax up to be self-sufficient after he lost the Firestorm powers if Stein were to retire. And then they kill Stein to force Jax to be without Stein on the Wave Rider with no baggage. And then Jax leaves, meaning all the development was entirely pointless. Not to mention how utterly boring it is to have yet another death. If you have every major character leave the show by dying, it stops being emotionally charged after, like, the second time. Also, I understand why they didn't have any classic Earth Xers apart from the Ray, because that would just be throwing way too many coals onto the fire that's already way too big, but I was a little disappointed that the Crisis on Earth X didn't feature Uncle Sam or any of the Freedom Fighters other than the Ray, but maybe his spin-off does that, which I haven't gotten around to watching yet, so it's not that big a deal, especially since the focus was on the major Nazi villains and not the Resistance fighters anyway. Finally, how royally messed up is it that Ollie and Felicity stepped on the wedding like that? Like, I get it, it's a universe-wide crossover, I don't expect them to ignore the characters of other shows to focus solely on Barry and Iris, but they hyped up the wedding as the West Allen wedding, and the Queen Smoke wedding is just thrown in at the end after only having been established in Part 1. Just from a character's perspective, it feels totally and utterly rude. If it was part of a greater arc in Arrow, I wouldn't know, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like the Flash wedding inspired the thoughts to make the relationship go deeper. Might have been better explored in the mid-season finale instead, with the same build-up scenes, but just not having the actual official wedding happen until the following episode, because stealing Iris West Allen's thunder ain't cool. I got a comment on an old video the other day. I won't say which, but it's from 2014, so year 1 of this show, when I was still working out all the kinks. And it complained that I took too long to say that the film I was reviewing at the time was overall limited on things to fix, and I realized that this video is the same way. As you might have noticed, I was overall very positive, and that's because it is a great crossover. It's far better than Invasion, and light years ahead of all the old Flash Arrow crossovers that I could only ever stomach watching the Flash half of. But even things we like have stupid elements that we wish could be fixed. And for this one, the major stupid is Stein's death. My rule for these fixes is that I have to work with what I have, and I can't alter anything that had to happen for a logical reason. Victor Garber was leaving the show, so Stein can't stick around as much as we all might have wanted him to. However, that doesn't mean he had to die as he did, and the issue isn't so much his death, although maybe getting shot by Nazis wasn't the best way to kill a Jewish character. I'd have the injury happen as Firestorm from a shot from one of the Nazi hero doppelgangers, like Nazi Supergirl or something, but more so the issue is what came after. I think that it was a total waste to just kill Stein when Jax left one episode later. They should have just let Stein retire and have Jax decide to return to the present with him if they were going to do that, because otherwise they've lost an interesting storytelling opportunity to have Firestorm return if either of the actors ever decide to guest star after they leave. If Victor Garber was super firm on never returning, they could have introduced a seemingly a one-off Earth X Firestorm, maybe Gehenna, who was Jason Rush's Firestorm partner in the comics, who loses her physical form counterpart like Stein did when Ronnie died, and they do some technobabble BS where Stein's powers are drained from him and into Gehenna, or like Jax has to sever his link with Stein and create a link with her, so Stein could retire him, and then in the following episode, Jax and the new Firestorm decide to either go back to Earth X to help out, or return to the present and do hero stuff away from the Legends craziness. That way, they don't lose Firestorm permanently, and probably save money, since I'm sure they spent a lot of money making the Firestorm CGI model, and Stein gets to live, and everyone gets to be happy. Plus, Stein could even show up on The Flash from time to time if he ever wanted to, which increases storytelling opportunities for Caitlin, since it gives a rival father figure instead of just racking up yet another pointless death of an iconic character from the comics. Plus, when Jax did return in the finale, Firestorm would get to go out in a blaze of glory instead of an ocean of tears. Overall, the plot would have stayed mostly the same, except I wouldn't have wasted the Legends or Supergirl support staff. I would have had Kara call John in for an assist, have Ray be at the wedding, and maybe give us a scene on the Wave Rider actually getting the distress call, just so that they can show up in Part 3 at least. And there'd be no double wedding in my version. Olicity can get married in an episode of their own show. Hell, it's not like Diggle was going anywhere, he could have done that for them whenever the hell they wanted. I'd also try to reunite the Justice League Detroit team, or at least let some of the members interact in some way. Because I think it's weird that Cynthia and Ralph are cast members of the same show, but they never actually met before Cynthia's untimely demise in the current season of The Flash. They might not have been beloved, but it'd have been a nice nod to the past of the DC Universe, given how, despite having Earth X, we saw a criminally low amount of members of the Freedom Fighters. And that was Crisis on Earth X, an overall really great crossover that had a few elements that I could personally do without, but it's still a really fun set of episodes to watch, and they got me really pumped for the Crisis, which I can say started out really damn good with a lot of fun DC mythology cameos in the first half, but we'll have to see if the ending lives up to the hype when it releases in mid-January. Which I'm a little bummed about because I want to see the ending now. Next week, we'll be getting a tad closer to Christmassy content as we look at the novelization of the most contentious Star Wars film of the decade. At least until Rise of Skywalker comes out. And I'm probably gonna piss off a lot of people with my opinions. See you next time. It's mind-blowing to me that the middle of Season 3 is when Arturo died, too. Also played by a uber-famous actor.